A lot of people build cybersecurity projects for months and still don't get interviews. The problem isn't effort. The problem is the wrong projects. Today, I'm ranking cybersecurity projects by how much they actually help you get hired. I'm judging every project by two simple questions. Could this exist exactly like this inside a real company? And could you explain it to a hiring manager in under 2 minutes? Let's start with something that sets the bar very high: SOC use case and detection engineering. In this project, you build a real detection use case using log data from systems like Active Directory or endpoints. You define suspicious behavior, create a detection rule, and then tune it to reduce false positives. This is exactly how SOC teams work day to day. You can start with a small home lab, a lightweight SIEM, and a single solid detection rule. For me, this is clearly S tier. Now let's contrast that with something a lot of people start with: CTFs like TryHackMe or Hack the Box. They're great for learning Linux, networking, and common attack techniques. The problem is that they usually have no scope, no business context, and no documentation. In real jobs, problems don't end when you capture a flag. If you start here, focus on a few selected labs and explain what you learned instead of chasing badges. That's why this sits firmly in C tier. Staying on the defensive side, let's look at incident response tabletop projects. Here, you simulate a realistic security incident without touching production systems. You build a timeline, define roles, and document what went wrong and what could be improved. This is exactly how many organizations prepare for incidents. You can start with a simple phishing scenario and an incident response framework. It's a very strong project, but for me it lands in A tier rather than S tier. A lot of people then move on to tool-focused projects, so let's talk about those next. Tool exploration projects usually mean installing a security tool and testing basic features. While that's useful for learning, it often stops before any real decision or outcome. Security teams care less about tools and more about the problems they solve. If you do this, at least tie the tool to one concrete use case and a clear conclusion. On its own, this stays in C tier. Now, here's a project that looks boring to some people but is extremely realistic: the vulnerability management lifecycle. This is about scanning systems, reviewing findings, and prioritizing risk instead of just listing CVEs. You decide what actually matters and explain why. That reflects real security work, where time and resources are always limited. You can start with a small lab, one scanner, and a short risk summary for the top findings. Because this is exactly how companies make security decisions, this is S tier. On the opposite end of the spectrum, let's talk about something that sounds productive but usually isn't. A cybersecurity blog without a concrete project shows that you can read and summarize information, but it doesn't show that you can apply security concepts in practice. Recruiters rarely see this as meaningful experience on its own. A blog can support real projects, but it shouldn't replace them. That's why this goes straight into D tier. Let's go back to something that's very close to real blue team work: security hardening projects. Here, you secure a system using established baselines and document the changes. You identify insecure settings, fix them, and explain the impact. This is very close to real system and defensive security work. A good way to start is with a single operating system and a well-known hardening guide. For that reason, this one is clearly S tier. Now, what about penetration testing demos? These often focus on exploitation with very little context. While offensive skills are useful, most security jobs don't look like this on a daily basis. Without scope, reporting, and risk discussion, the impact stays limited. If you start here, focus less on the exploit itself and more on explaining the finding and its business impact. Overall, this ends up in C tier. Let's shift from reactive work to something more preventive: threat modeling. Threat modeling is about identifying assets, threats, and controls before something goes wrong. It's a proactive activity that many organizations struggle to do well. Doing this properly shows structured and preventive thinking. You can start with a simple web application and one threat modeling framework. It's a very solid project, but I'd rank it A tier rather than S tier. Another thing that comes up a lot in portfolios is copied content, so we need to address that. Copy-paste Medium articles or GitHub repositories are easy to spot. They show no ownership, no real understanding, and no personal effort. In interviews, this often raises red flags instead of helping your profile. There's no good way to start here, and this clearly belongs in D tier. Now let's talk about cloud projects, because this is where a lot of real-world security issues actually happen. Cloud misconfiguration projects focus on finding insecure cloud settings and actually fixing them. Most real cloud incidents come from simple mistakes, not advanced exploits. Showing that you can identify and remediate those issues is extremely relevant for real jobs. You can start with a free cloud account and one intentionally insecure setup. For hiring purposes, this is absolutely S tier. Finally, let's look at a project that doesn't get nearly enough attention on YouTube: GRC, and ISMS work. A GRC or ISMS mini project, for example using a tool like Verinice, is about defining scope, assessing risks, and documenting controls. This reflects everyday work in GRC and compliance-focused roles. Many candidates have never done this in practice. You can start with a small fictional organization and a very limited scope. From a recruiter's perspective, this comfortably sits in S tier. Strong cybersecurity projects show real decisions, real trade-offs, and real documentation. If a project doesn't do that, it's not really a project. At the end of the day, cybersecurity projects aren't about being flashy. They're about showing that you understand how security work actually happens. If your project shows real decisions, real trade-offs, and real documentation, it's already ahead of most portfolios.